The first Sunday morning at Camp Hearn, Texas, when Obergefreiter Johann Müller was invited to attend Protestant church services alongside his American guards, he stood frozen at the chapel entrance, unable to comprehend what seemed like an impossible contradiction of everything he understood about prisoner of war treatment. The 23-year-old Wehrmacht veteran, captured during the Tunisia campaign, stared at American soldiers holding hymnals next to German prisoners in what appeared to be genuine religious fellowship. "They want us to pray with them," Müller whispered to his bunkmate, Feldwebel Klaus Weber, as they watched American guards and German captives filing into wooden pews together. "This must be some kind of psychological experiment or propaganda operation. No army treats enemy prisoners as equals before God." These were battle-hardened soldiers who had been indoctrinated to expect brutal treatment, forced labor, and systematic degradation at the hands of enemy captors. The concept of shared religious worship between guards and prisoners seemed to violate every assumption about military protocol, religious doctrine, and the fundamental nature of warfare they had ever learned. They had no way of knowing they were about to experience the most profound spiritual reconciliation program in military prison history, or that these interfaith services would become a powerful demonstration of Christian values that would fundamentally challenge their understanding of American society and democratic principles forever. Chaplain Robert Henderson adjusted his vestments in the small chapel at Camp Hearn, preparing for what would become the most challenging and rewarding ministry of his military career. As a Methodist minister from Ohio who had volunteered for military service, Henderson believed that Christian fellowship could bridge any human divide, including the hatred that separated American guards from German prisoners of war. The chapel construction at Camp Hearn represented American commitment to religious freedom that exceeded Geneva Convention requirements, while demonstrating democratic values that distinguished American society from totalitarian alternatives. The wooden building featured Protestant and Catholic sections, chaplain offices, and interfaith meeting spaces that provided dignity and respect for diverse religious traditions. Obergefreiter Johann Müller approached the chapel entrance with profound suspicion and confusion that reflected Wehrmacht indoctrination about American religious hypocrisy and democratic weakness. Nazi propaganda had characterized Americans as godless materialists who used religious rhetoric to disguise imperialistic aggression and cultural decadence that contradicted authentic spiritual values. The invitation to attend religious services alongside American guards challenged fundamental German assumptions about prisoner treatment and military protocol. Müller had expected forced labor, systematic brutality, and ideological indoctrination, not opportunities for voluntary religious worship that demonstrated respect for enemy spiritual needs and cultural traditions. American camp administrators had established interfaith programs that included Protestant services, Catholic Mass, and Bible study groups that welcomed voluntary participation from both guards and prisoners. This inclusive approach reflected constitutional principles about religious freedom that extended even to enemy captives during wartime conditions. The first joint service took place on Sunday, August 15, 1943, with 40 German prisoners and 60 American guards sharing hymns, prayers, and biblical readings that emphasized universal Christian themes of forgiveness, redemption, and human brotherhood. The experience created emotional impact that transcended national boundaries and military conflicts. Chaplain Henderson's sermon focused on the parable of the Good Samaritan, emphasizing Christian obligation to show mercy toward traditional enemies and strangers in need. His message resonated with both American guards and German prisoners who discovered shared spiritual values that challenged propaganda characterizations of enemy society and cultural traditions. The psychological transformation that religious fellowship achieved included recognition that enemies possessed genuine faith and moral values rather than representing evil caricatures promoted by wartime propaganda. Shared worship humanized opponents while demonstrating universal spiritual needs that transcended political differences and military conflicts. Language barriers initially complicated religious participation, but gradually dissolved as German prisoners learned English hymns while American guards discovered German religious traditions. Chaplain Henderson encouraged bilingual services that honored both cultures while emphasizing common Christian heritage and shared spiritual aspirations. The voluntary nature of religious participation demonstrated American respect for individual conscience and religious freedom that contrasted sharply with totalitarian approaches to spiritual life. No prisoner faced pressure to attend services or adopt specific religious beliefs, reflecting democratic principles about personal autonomy and spiritual choice. International Red Cross observers documented interfaith programs that exceeded humanitarian standards while demonstrating innovative approaches to prisoner rehabilitation through spiritual ministry. These external validations provided credibility for religious initiatives while influencing global discussions about humane treatment and cultural respect. The security benefits that religious programs achieved included improved prisoner behavior, enhanced cooperation with camp administration, and reduced escape attempts that demonstrated how positive treatment could achieve better outcomes than punitive approaches. Faith had become a tool for successful prisoner management through voluntary participation rather than coercive indoctrination. Pastor Wilhelm Hoffmann, a German prisoner who had served as a Lutheran minister before his military service, found himself collaborating with Chaplain Henderson to provide German-language religious services that honored prisoner spiritual needs while fostering interfaith dialogue between former enemies. The cooperation between American and German clergy demonstrated Christian unity that transcended national boundaries and military conflicts. The theological discussions that emerged from interfaith services included examinations of Christian teachings about forgiveness, reconciliation, and moral responsibility that challenged both American and German participants to reconsider their understanding of enemy society and religious tradition. Bible study groups created opportunities for deeper spiritual exploration and cultural exchange. Sunday communion services presented the most profound challenge to traditional military protocol, as German prisoners and American guards knelt together at altar rails, receiving sacred elements from the same chalice, while participating in Christian sacraments that emphasized spiritual equality before God. These moments created emotional transformation that exceeded any formal rehabilitation program. Feldwebel Klaus Weber, initially skeptical about American religious sincerity, gradually developed genuine appreciation for chaplain ministries that demonstrated authentic faith rather than propaganda manipulation. The consistent quality of spiritual care convinced Weber that American religious values reflected genuine cultural characteristics rather than superficial democratic rhetoric. The holiday celebrations that interfaith programs facilitated included joint Christmas services, Easter worship, and Thanksgiving prayers that enabled German prisoners to maintain cultural traditions while appreciating American religious practices. These seasonal observances created positive memories that enhanced prisoner morale while demonstrating cultural respect and religious tolerance. Prayer groups that formed spontaneously among mixed populations of guards and prisoners created informal spiritual communities that addressed personal concerns, family anxieties, and moral questions arising from wartime service. These intimate gatherings fostered personal relationships that humanized former enemies while providing emotional support during challenging circumstances. The biblical education that chaplain programs provided included literacy instruction for prisoners who wanted to read scripture in English, theological seminars that explored Christian doctrine, and moral philosophy discussions that addressed ethical questions about warfare, citizenship, and personal responsibility. These educational opportunities enhanced intellectual development while supporting spiritual growth. Confession and counseling services provided by both American and German clergy addressed combat trauma, guilt about wartime actions, and anxiety about family separation through spiritual guidance that emphasized divine forgiveness and personal redemption. These therapeutic interventions enhanced mental health while supporting psychological recovery from warfare experiences. The musical ministry that developed around interfaith services included German and American hymns, instrumental accompaniment by talented prisoners and guards, and choir performances that created artistic beauty while demonstrating cultural cooperation. Music became a universal language that facilitated spiritual expression and community building. Baptismal services performed in camp chapels included conversions among both American guards and German prisoners who experienced spiritual awakening through interfaith fellowship and biblical instruction. These religious commitments created lasting transformation that would influence participants throughout their post-war lives. The correspondence that prisoners sent home describing religious experiences provided German families with evidence of American spiritual values that contradicted Nazi propaganda about godless democracy and materialistic culture. Letters about chapel services influenced German civilian attitudes toward occupation and reconstruction by demonstrating authentic Christian character. Interfaith dialogue between Protestant and Catholic participants created ecumenical understanding that transcended denominational differences while emphasizing common Christian heritage. These discussions prepared both guards and prisoners for post-war religious cooperation and international Christian fellowship that would influence global church relationships. The theological reflection that prison ministry encouraged helped participants process wartime experiences through spiritual frameworks that emphasized divine sovereignty, human forgiveness, and moral restoration, creating foundations for post-war healing and reconciliation. Christmas Eve, 1943. The chapel at Camp Hearn glowed with candlelight as over 200 German prisoners and American guards participated in joint midnight services that created the most profound demonstration of Christian fellowship between former enemies in military history. Obergefreiter Johann Müller held a hymnal next to Sergeant Mike O'Sullivan from Boston, their voices blending in Silent Night, sung in both German and English. The Christmas pageant that prisoners and guards collaborated to produce included German prisoners portraying biblical characters while American guards provided musical accompaniment and stage support. This theatrical cooperation demonstrated cultural exchange that transcended military boundaries while creating artistic beauty that enhanced seasonal celebrations for entire camp community. Gift exchanges between guards and prisoners reflected spontaneous generosity that challenged military protocol while demonstrating personal relationships that had developed through shared religious experience. Handmade crafts, written poems, and small personal items passed between former enemies as expressions of Christian fellowship and human friendship. The Christmas dinner served in camp mess halls included traditional German holiday foods prepared by prisoner cooks alongside American festive dishes, creating multicultural celebration that honored both cultures while emphasizing common human traditions of hospitality and seasonal joy. Guards and prisoners shared meals with gratitude and mutual respect. Pastor Hoffman delivered the Christmas sermon in German, while Chaplain Henderson provided English translation, creating bilingual worship that honored prisoner heritage while facilitating American participation. The sermon emphasized Christ's birth as symbol of divine love that transcended human divisions and political conflicts. Children's Christmas programs organized by prison staff included American civilian families visiting camp to share holiday celebrations with German prisoners who missed their own children. These intergenerational gatherings created emotional connections that humanized enemies while demonstrating American family values and community spirit. The nativity scenes constructed jointly by prisoners and guards featured artistic collaboration that produced religious displays of exceptional beauty and spiritual significance. German woodcarving skills combined with American artistic materials created sacred art that enhanced chapel worship while demonstrating creative cooperation between former enemies. Charitable collections taken during Christmas services raised funds for European war orphans and refugee assistance, with German prisoners contributing from their modest camp wages alongside American Guard donations. This shared philanthropy demonstrated Christian compassion that transcended national boundaries while addressing humanitarian needs. Carol singing throughout campgrounds included mixed groups of guards and prisoners who performed Christmas music for camp administration, civilian workers, and visiting officials. These musical presentations created festive atmosphere while showcasing cultural cooperation and spiritual fellowship that exceeded formal rehabilitation programs. The midnight communion service represented the spiritual climax of Christmas celebration as German prisoners and American guards approached altar together to receive sacred elements that emphasized Christian unity and divine forgiveness. Tears flowed freely as former enemies experienced profound spiritual connection. Prayer vigils maintained throughout Christmas night included both American and German participants who offered intercessions for family members, military units, and global peace. These extended worship experiences created intimate spiritual community that addressed personal concerns while fostering international understanding. The Christmas letters that prisoners wrote home described religious celebrations that provided German families with evidence of American Christian character and humanitarian treatment. These testimonies influenced German civilian attitudes toward democratic society while demonstrating authentic religious values rather than propaganda manipulation. New Year's services that concluded holiday celebrations included prayers for peace, reconciliation, and divine guidance in 1944. Guards and prisoners expressed hopes for war's end and future friendship between nations, creating spiritual foundations for post-war reconstruction and international cooperation. The communion of former enemies had achieved spiritual transformation that would influence participants throughout their lives, while demonstrating Christianity's power to overcome hatred through divine love and human fellowship. Spring 1944. The confirmation classes that Chaplain Henderson conducted for German prisoners who wanted to deepen their Christian faith created educational opportunities that exceeded traditional military detention while demonstrating American commitment to spiritual development and religious freedom. Johann Müller found himself studying Protestant theology alongside American guards who served as confirmation sponsors and spiritual mentors. The theological education that confirmation preparation provided included systematic instruction in Christian doctrine, biblical interpretation, and church history that enhanced intellectual development while supporting spiritual growth. German prisoners received theological training that exceeded what many had experienced in civilian life while maintaining voluntary participation that respected individual religious choice. Baptismal services performed for prisoners who experienced religious conversion through camp ministry represented profound spiritual transformation that would influence their entire future lives. The sacred ceremony conducted jointly by American and German clergy emphasized divine acceptance and community fellowship that transcended national boundaries and military conflicts. The Bible study groups that met throughout the week included mixed participation from guards and prisoners who explored Scripture together while addressing theological questions and personal concerns through collaborative discussion. These intimate gatherings created intellectual community that enhanced both religious understanding and cross-cultural friendship. Youth ministry programs developed for younger prisoners provided spiritual guidance specifically designed for military personnel struggling with combat trauma and moral questions about warfare. These specialized ministries addressed unique needs of soldiers while offering hope for psychological healing and spiritual restoration. The religious library established in Camp Chapel included German and English biblical texts, theological commentary, devotional literature, and religious history that provided intellectual resources for spiritual development. Prisoners could access religious education materials that enhanced their theological knowledge while supporting personal faith development. Counseling services provided by chaplains addressed family concerns, moral guilt, and existential questions through spiritual guidance that emphasized divine forgiveness and personal redemption. These therapeutic interventions helped prisoners process wartime experiences while preparing for eventual reintegration into civilian society. Mission projects organized by religious groups included charitable work within camp community, letter writing to encourage other prisoners, and practical service that demonstrated Christian love through concrete actions. These activities provided meaningful purpose while creating opportunities for spiritual growth through service to others. The interfaith dialogue that developed between Protestant and Catholic participants created ecumenical understanding that prepared prisoners for post-war religious cooperation and international Christian fellowship. These discussions enhanced theological knowledge while building bridges between denominational traditions. Prayer networks that connected prisoners with their families through spiritual intercession provided emotional comfort while maintaining family relationships despite physical separation. Letters describing religious activities reassured German families about prisoner welfare while demonstrating American respect for religious tradition. The evangelistic activities that some prisoners undertook included sharing faith experiences with skeptical fellow prisoners and encouraging religious participation among reluctant participants. These peer ministry efforts achieved conversion results that exceeded formal chaplain programs while demonstrating authentic spiritual transformation. Religious music programs that included both German and American hymns created worship experiences that honored cultural traditions while building spiritual community. Prisoner musicians collaborated with American guards to provide musical accompaniment that enhanced religious services and seasonal celebrations. The moral reflection that religious participation encouraged helped prisoners examine their wartime actions while discovering frameworks for forgiveness and personal restoration. Chaplain guidance provided spiritual resources for processing guilt and finding redemption through divine grace. Graduation ceremonies for confirmation classes included recognition show of spiritual achievement, while celebrating educational accomplishment that would benefit prisoners throughout their lives. American and German clergy participated jointly in ceremonies that emphasized religious community and international Christian fellowship. May 1945. As news of Germany's surrender reached Camp Herne and repatriation preparations began, Johann Müller knelt in the chapel where he had discovered American Christian character that contradicted every assumption about enemy society and democratic values. The man preparing to return home bore little resemblance to the bitter Wehrmacht soldier who had arrived 2 years earlier expecting brutal treatment from godless captors. The farewell services that concluded prison ministry included emotional ceremonies where German prisoners and American guards exchanged addresses and promised continued correspondence that would maintain friendships formed through shared religious experience. Chaplain Henderson blessed each departing prisoner while emphasizing Christian fellowship that transcended national boundaries and political differences. The theological certificates that prisoners received for completing religious education programs provided formal recognition of spiritual achievement while documenting educational accomplishment that would benefit post-war careers and church leadership. These credentials validated intellectual development through systematic religious instruction that exceeded traditional military detention programs. Johann Müller's transformation from suspicious prisoner to committed Christian represented personal renewal that would influence his entire future life while demonstrating rehabilitation potential through spiritual ministry and religious fellowship. His experience exemplified successful prisoner conversion through voluntary religious participation rather than coercive indoctrination or political propaganda. The letters of recommendation that American chaplains provided for departing prisoners included testimonies about character development, spiritual growth, and leadership potential that would assist reintegration into German society and church communities. These endorsements reflected genuine appreciation for prisoner participation while supporting post-war reconstruction through religious cooperation. Pastor Hoffman's preparation for return to Lutheran ministry in Germany included theological education received through American chaplain programs and interfaith fellowship that would enhance his pastoral effectiveness while promoting international Christian understanding. His experience represented successful preparation for post-war religious leadership through prison ministry participation. The prayer commitments that guards and prisoners made for continued spiritual fellowship included promises to remember each other in worship and intercession while supporting post-war reconstruction through Christian cooperation. These spiritual bonds would influence both American and German participants throughout their lives, while creating foundations for international friendship. The Bibles and religious literature that American chaplains provided as farewell gifts included German-language texts and devotional materials that would support continued spiritual development while serving as tangible reminders of American Christian generosity and religious respect during captivity experience. The Reconstruction advice that American clergy offered included guidance about post-war church rebuilding, democratic participation, and international cooperation that would benefit German religious communities while promoting peaceful relationships between former enemies. This practical counsel demonstrated American investment in positive post-war outcomes. The testimonial letters that prisoners wrote about American religious treatment provided documentation for post-war discussions about prisoner care while influencing German church attitudes toward democratic society and international Christian fellowship. These testimonies would support reconciliation efforts while challenging anti-American propaganda. The spiritual legacy that prison ministry created included lasting friendships between former enemies, enhanced theological understanding, and commitment to international Christian cooperation that would influence post-war church relationships. Faith had achieved reconciliation that political diplomacy could never accomplish through human effort alone. The changed hearts that departed Camp Hearn carried more than personal transformation. They represented proof that Christian fellowship could overcome hatred while demonstrating divine love's power to heal national divisions and create lasting peace through spiritual renewal and religious cooperation. If this incredible story of how faith transcended warfare and transformed enemies into brothers in Christ inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of spiritual victory over hatred during World War II.